I thought finding a stranger's cufflink in our bedroom was the worst betrayal. But that was only the beginning. What I uncovered next changed everything, including who I thought I was. Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by. My name's Eric, I'm 30 years old and I've been married to my wife, Melissa, who's 32 for nearly a decade. We have a little boy named Noah, he just turned 6. Smart as a whip, that kid. Honestly, I'm grateful he's quick on his feet because the world he's stepping into seems more unstable with each passing day. Then again, so is my own life. I first met Melissa back in college and I was instantly drawn to her. At first, it was just physical. Her curves, her smile, the way her whole body leaned into mine when she hugged me after I helped her pass a tough business management exam. But it didn't take long, maybe a day, maybe less, before it went deeper. Her eyes had this spark, her laugh hit something inside me, and she never once forgot how I took my coffee. Just small details, but they stuck. We waited until our third date before getting intimate, but proposing? That took me a full 6 months to build up the nerve. After I finally popped the question, we spent about a year wrapping up college, landing our first jobs, finding a small apartment, and then tying the knot. The last 7 years have been anything but predictable. My career path has twisted and turned more than once. I changed companies twice before I finally took the leap and started my own business 2 years ago. I work with small firms, helping them figure out strategy, growth, all that. Then one day, something shifted, and I still remember the moment it all started falling apart. I found myself staring down at a single gold cufflink resting on our white marble counter. I'd placed it there earlier, but now in better light, it looked different. I could make out fine details I hadn't noticed before. On the larger square there was a crest, split diagonally. One side showed a horse rearing up, proud and wild. The other had 3 small circles like billiard balls, arranged in a neat triangle. The smaller square was even more complex. Twisted letters, probably initials, were laced through each other. I could make out an R, and what looked like an M, one letter tangled in the legs of the other. It felt like someone had opened a crack in the wall of my life and let the cold flood in. My head spun. I tried to stand, but my body wouldn't listen. The room tilted, and my eyes saw everything from what felt like the far end of a tunnel. Later, when I could finally speak, my voice didn't sound like mine. It was shaky, hollow. I made my way upstairs, threw up everything in my stomach, then staggered into the shower. After 3 aspirin and a long moment wrapped in my robe, I collapsed on the bed and drifted into 3 more hours of broken sleep. When I came back down to the kitchen, Melissa was gone. No sign of her except for a short note left on the table. She'd packed up a few essentials, underwear, some clothes, and strangely enough, my laptop. Later, when I went downstairs again, she tried to stop me. She reached for me, eyes wide, saying something I didn't fully hear. But I didn't stop. I turned my back, walked straight to the garage, got into my car, and pulled out onto the road, needing space, needing to breathe. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Melissa standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, her silhouette framed by the open door. Driving away wasn't the hardest part. Figuring out where to go was. But even tougher was figuring out what to feel. I was gutted. There was what felt like betrayal, sure, the lies, the deception. But what truly crushed me was that it came from the woman I'd poured my entire heart into for nearly 9 years. A woman I once loved more than I loved myself. And then there was Noah. The thought of not seeing him every day? That was its own kind of torture. Eventually, Melissa and I met at a cafe to talk. Neither of us was in the mood to eat, so we just ordered coffee and water. The silence was thick until she finally spoke, almost as soon as the waitress walked away. "Tell me, Eric," she said, voice trembling but defiant, "how would you have felt?" She didn't wait for me to answer. You wake up, run to the bathroom to throw up, then you shut down completely. You crawl into bed and disappear into yourself. Meanwhile, I have to go pick up Noah, all while trying not to let my mom see how wrecked I am. Then I come home and all you care about is a cufflink? One I've never even seen before? You didn't ask how I was. You didn't give me a chance. You just packed your stuff and left. You left me. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. I had no words. My mind was a blur, caught somewhere between guilt, confusion, and that hollow ache of doubt. Somewhere in the mix of all this chaos, I kept thinking about Roger. He was a new face in town, someone Melissa had casually mentioned weeks ago. She told me he was just here for a few months, sent over to help turn around a local business that had recently been acquired by the British corporation he worked for. A temporary gig, or so she said. Just another rung on his corporate ladder. But even then, my attention was drifting. That day, I'd been struggling with my necktie in front of the mirror. I've always hated wearing those things, when I caught a glimpse of Roger through the reflection. He was slipping a thick ring onto his finger. A signet ring. It looked heavy, expensive. I couldn't make out the details on it, but I noticed he was dressed sharply, and wore it with the kind of confidence that makes you wonder if you should be worried. Later, trying to distract myself, I went shopping. I picked up meat for the grill, some wine, a few sides, and even a new toy for Noah. I passed a bucket of pink roses, hesitated, walked away, and then circled back to buy them. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to believe things could still be normal. But the house felt different when I got back. Not just empty in the physical sense, it felt like whatever gave it warmth had vanished. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I was the one that changed. I checked the bedroom first. Everything looked untouched. The bed was made, drawers closed, nothing obviously out of place. But that didn't settle anything. The disturbance wasn't in the things I could see, it was in what I felt. Later we met Roger again, this time for dinner at his favorite restaurant. It was just a casual get-together on the surface. We even made plans for another round of golf. There wasn't a single mention of the separation between Melissa and me. We played it cool like nothing had shifted. But sitting across from her that afternoon, I'd never felt more married, and more disconnected, all at once. I picked Noah up from a friend's place that evening and brought him home. The moment he saw me, his whole face lit up. He was genuinely happy. We ended up playing his favorite video game together, and of course he crushed me twice. He called it a celebration. I called it mercy. After I tucked him in and read him a chapter from his favorite illustrated version of the Odyssey, I headed downstairs, ready to leave for the night. But Melissa was there, waiting. "Can you stay, just a little longer?" she asked softly, holding out a cup of tea with trembling hands. Her eyes were red and puffy, she'd been crying. Her voice was faint, almost drowned in the fabric of my jacket when she leaned in. "I just came to pick up Noah," I replied, trying to keep it cold. She stopped crying suddenly and looked up at me. Her face was blotchy, eyes wide and desperate. "You're not taking him," she said hoarsely, her voice rising. "You don't get to take him until you talk to me. You don't get a divorce until you listen to me. Do you hear me?" Her fists gripped the front of my jacket, knuckles white with tension. I gently pushed her back a little to give us both space. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'm listening." She seemed caught off guard. Her expression changed, softened slightly. She turned her head so I could fully see her face. "You remember the cufflink?" she said, her voice strained. "It wasn't real. You must have been dreaming, or maybe your memory's just confusing things. Like when you were a kid and you used to sleepwalk. You told me that all the time." She paused, trying to read my face. "Please, Eric," she said, voice breaking. "I would have told you if it was something like that, even if I had done something wrong. I wouldn't lie to you now. It hurts that you think I could. I really believed it was just a dream. I mean it." Her voice began to crack, her hands trembling where they clung to the sleeves of my jacket. Then just like that, something snapped in her. "Get out," she screamed, the words cutting through the room like a knife. "Get out of my house, you lying monster. You'll never see Noah again. I'll divorce you, I swear it. Just go." She lunged at me, fists flying, and I instinctively grabbed her arms to stop her, holding her in place. Our faces ended up close, too close. She was breathing hard, furious and shaking. And then, I laughed. Not out of cruelty, but because the whole situation had tipped into something too absurd for words. The betrayal, the desperation, the denial, it all spun into this surreal storm, and laughing was the only thing left I could do. She froze. "I lied, Melissa," I said, my voice suddenly calm, almost too calm. "I never cheated. Not once. You were right, I could never do that to you." Her breath hitched in her throat. You lied?" she whispered. "Yes," I said simply. "Why?" she asked, dazed. "Why would you lie about something like that?" I didn't answer right away. The truth felt tangled in 1,000 things, pain, hope, heartbreak. But I finally said, "Because I was chasing a dream. Something I thought we had, something I thought we could fix. But maybe I just needed to see it all come undone." Later that week we found ourselves at a gala, the kind you only see in magazines. Champagne fountains, towers of oysters, chandeliers bigger than my car. Everywhere I looked there were luxury gowns, designer suits, Dior, Saint Laurent, Prada, Gucci. Fur coats, diamonds, movie stars, politicians. Millionaires, billionaires, all mingling like they were just neighbors. And I stood there, completely detached. Like I was watching someone else's life play out. I'd had too much to drink that night, but truthfully I think what really got me wasn't the alcohol. It was the rush, the chaos, the strange high of being surrounded by opulence and strangers who acted like royalty. The buzz of it all left me disoriented. I don't even remember how I ended up there, naked, sprawled across the four-poster bed in a guest room off the ballroom. Melissa was talking. Her voice was soft, distant, almost as if she were trying to anchor herself as much as she was trying to reach me. The silence, she said, her voice barely a whisper, it was perfect. I wasn't breathing. I couldn't. My mind painted a picture I didn't want, of her, the woman I'd loved for 8 years in that same bed, a stranger to me now. And me? I had become someone I didn't even recognize, stuck in an endless loop of shallow nights and distractions that led nowhere. The room tilted slightly, like the floor itself had started to shift beneath me. Her words still floated in the air when I heard her ask, "Are you okay, Eric?" Her voice was laced with concern, but I couldn't respond right away. I feel sick. I'm sorry, I finally said. I get why I stopped myself. She looked down, her fingers nervously smoothing the fabric of her skirt. I think he always felt guilty, she said suddenly. About what my father did. He just stood there and let it happen. Her words hit like a quiet earthquake. I turned away, unsure how to respond. She shrugged lightly like it hurt too much to stay in that space and kept talking. But then I met you and for a while, none of that mattered anymore. A bitter chuckle escaped me before I could stop it. Clueless me, I muttered. Stupid Eric. Must have been easy to keep the lovesick fool in the dark, huh? You and Roger probably had a good laugh behind my back. Her breath caught sharply. Both of her hands shot out to grip mine tightly. Her eyes widened. No, she said firmly. Never. Her voice carried a weight I hadn't heard in a long time. Maybe it was the physical space between us, or maybe it was the fact that we were both too tired to lie anymore. But for the first time since things fell apart, it felt like we were really talking. Not just with words but in the way we sounded. Raw. Honest. Human. I admire your courage, I told her quietly. She gave a weak smile. Not bad for a coward, she replied, her voice trembling. She tried to hold back a laugh, but a small one slipped out anyway. It was the kind of laugh you don't mean to release, one that hurts more than it heals. Her mood shifted again. A memory returned, tightening her expression. He still had that same presence, she murmured. Big frame, rough skin, thick brows, the mustache, those deep eyes, and that smile that always made my stomach turn. She shuddered and looked away. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her skirt, pulling at the threads. He said he was just passing through, she added quietly, wanted to see how I was doing. But I knew that wasn't true. His voice had that same fake warmth, that syrupy politeness that made everything feel worse. Melissa swallowed hard. Then she said, almost to herself, and then he stepped forward. I felt cornered. Like the walls were slowly closing in. Part of me wanted to walk away from it all, to shut the door completely even if it slammed shut behind me. But that wasn't really possible, not with Noah involved. Not unless Melissa was willing to risk custody, and she wasn't. Phil, my attorney, shrugged one afternoon and said, stick to the papers we've already drawn up. Get her to sign them. Then, figure out how to move on with your life. But she hadn't signed. Not even the first version, the one we thought was generous, maybe too generous. A part of me was angry, livid even. But there was another part, deeper, quieter, frozen. That part still didn't want this to end. That part still loved her. Divorce? What was that really going to give me? Freedom? The word alone made me laugh dry and hollow. There's no freedom in loving someone who doesn't love you back. You can walk away, sure, but you're still chained to the memories. Things got worse when more information started surfacing. Some messy scandal involving a European aristocrat. Rumors of drugs, even human trafficking. The case never stuck, not enough solid evidence, but Melissa's name came up in the documents. There was even a brief interview with her. But all her answers were vague, I don't know, and I never saw anything. The Count himself wasn't named outright, but there were hints. References to a Chesterton. Maybe even his son. I scanned the file and looked over at Phil. Is that all? I asked. He nodded. Nothing she hasn't already danced around. I left his office feeling like I was walking through fog. I kept wondering, if push came to shove, could I actually pull the trigger? Literally or figuratively. Could I fight? Run? Survive? And if I did, would I even want to? The thought haunted me. If I escaped, I'd still be a marked man. Either hunted or locked up. There wasn't much in between. Life behind bars or a bullet in the back. Pick your ending. I shoved those thoughts aside and made a choice. But it didn't make anything easier. The loneliness was crushing. I missed Noah more than I could say. I missed Melissa too, even if she didn't miss me. That absence carved something out of me until I wasn't sure who I even was anymore. Eventually, everything blurred. And then came the hospital. At first, there were only lights and movement, blurry shapes of walls and nurses shifting around me. My skull felt like it had split open, but I was conscious. I knew where I was. I knew why I was there. A familiar voice pulled me back. "Hey, Eric." I squinted through the pain, my throat dry as sand. "Moreland," I croaked, the name catching up to my thoughts. The realization hit me like a breaker wave. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain forced me flat again. He gave a small laugh, that usual cocky smirk still plastered across his face. I closed my eyes. Maybe love had never been what I thought it was. Maybe it was just a story I wanted to believe in, the kind told in novels and scripted by movie studios. But my life had never been like that. And now I wasn't even sure I ever really knew what love was. I didn't fall in love with him all at once. It happened gradually, quietly. So maybe that's exactly how I fell out of love too, not with a bang but with a slow and painful drift. Except it wasn't a clean break. It felt like I was crawling out of something sticky, clinging. Every inch away from him felt like betrayal, and yet I kept going. I'm Melissa, Eric's wife, Noah's mother, and I know even now that my husband still loves me. Despite everything I did, despite every choice that tore at the fabric of our life, that love is still there. I can feel it. It would be so easy to scoff at it, to reduce it to some naive loyalty, to laugh at the man who keeps holding on. But I can't, because I know it's real. And that hurts more than any anger he's ever shown. The year after everything blew up, I came to think of it as my crazy year. That's what I called it. But deep down, I knew calling it that was just a way to separate myself from my own actions, as if giving it a name somehow made it not my fault. I told myself I didn't have a choice, that I was coerced, that I didn't consent. But I did. Not at first. But eventually, I stopped resisting. And the part that haunts me most is that I didn't want to stop. I leaned into the lie that I had no freedom, that I'd been cornered, that it wasn't my fault. I told myself I was trapped. But what scared me most was the quiet suspicion that the cage had never been locked. Somehow I kept up the act. I convinced people, even my therapist, that I was fine, that I'd been taken advantage of, manipulated. Robert was careful, always careful. He had an image to uphold, a reputation to maintain. Cold and calculating, he never contacted me when Eric was home. Somehow he always knew when Eric would be gone, sometimes even before I did. He'd call days in advance, line up a babysitter for Noah without asking, plan it all down to the minute. He stopped bringing me to his place after a while, probably because it became too risky. It was all done in the shadows. No emotion, no mess, just control. I hadn't thought much about Roger since he left for Europe. He'd crumbled when it mattered most, when I needed him to stand up to his father, to protect me, to say no. He didn't. He stood aside. And when I was used and tossed aside like an object, his softness afterward only repulsed me more. He helped me recover, yes. He pulled me out of the darkest place I'd ever been. But somehow that only made me resent him more. It wasn't fair, I knew that. But that's how I felt. I started to become whatever Robert needed me to be. Loyal. Obedient. He'd decide who I should like, who I should hate, and I followed suit. I did whatever was expected of me. I think I lost myself somewhere in there. Or maybe I gave myself away piece by piece. And then one day Eric looked at me. His eyes were filled with so much pain, not anger, not even betrayal, just heartbreak. He asked me, is he really worth all this? Worth breaking my heart instead of telling me the truth? I couldn't even look at him. His eyes, so wide, so sad, they made me nauseous. That's when I realized how far I'd sunk. How deep I was buried in a mess of my own making. And how little of myself I had left to give. I shot up from my chair, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of disgust. Not just at him, but at myself. I grabbed my purse, heart racing, and practically ran out. So much for "it'll be easy, Daddy," I muttered under my breath as I walked away, bitter and shaking. For a while I played nice. I let Eric see Noah again. If nothing else, it gave me a reason to rebuild my bond with my son, something I'd neglected for far too long. In a strange way, I even grew close to Eric again. I told myself I was doing it to be near you, to be there when you finally left him for good. But you didn't. I waited. I watched. I convinced myself it was just a matter of time. Eventually, I gave up waiting. I accepted that you'd made your choice. So I left, fled to Europe, hoping distance would dull the ache. But when Eric managed to bring you back, to make you stay, something inside me cracked. I came back too. Back to fight, back to prove something. I don't even know what. I heard what Eric said that night. I knew it was supposed to move me, to break me open. And maybe it did in some dark hidden corner of my soul. But all I felt was contempt. His unwavering loyalty, it struck me as pathetic. I laughed quietly, bitterly. "You're going to fight him?" I asked mockingly, though part of me wasn't sure who I was taunting, him or myself. Still he didn't waver. He stood, walked calmly around the table and took my hand. His touch was gentle. He helped me to my feet even though my knees barely held me. Then, without force, without accusation, he pulled me close. My head rested on his chest, and I breathed in a scent I once knew well. Familiar but unsettling. "Go home, Melissa," he said, his voice low. "Tell Eric the truth about Robert. He deserves that. Don't worry about my father. I'll handle him." The days after that were a blur. My thoughts tangled, my emotions unpredictable. Robert had always taken control of everything. Even now, the hold he had over me lingered. Then one evening something changed. I was at a formal dinner, tense, on edge. I didn't expect him to snap like that. His hand in my hair, the sound of shattered crystal and dishes raining onto the floor. My dress tore down the front like paper. It offered more resistance than I did. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I didn't know how. But just as I was about to be dragged further into that nightmare, a familiar figure stepped in. One of the men, someone I never thought I'd be grateful for, took over. I couldn't even speak. The moment was too much. Too fast. Too real. The next morning I was still numb. Later that evening I returned to Eric's place. I stood outside the door for a long time before finally walking in. I heard him before I saw him. He was helping Noah get ready for bed, gently talking, laughing quietly, their easy rhythm so painfully natural. I slipped into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, tried to steady my breath. Tried to look like someone who hadn't come apart. When I stepped back out, Eric glanced at me. No anger. Just calm. We poured the last of the wine and sat across from each other. The silence was thick, but not hostile. Just full. I still felt the residue of everything that had happened. The tension, the grief, the shame, it all clung to me like a second skin. But sitting there with him, watching him gently guide Noah to bed, I realized something. There was a time when I had everything. And I walked away from it. I could feel my pulse in my ears, the sound of my own breath echoing louder than anything he said. My thoughts were spinning out of control, collapsing in on themselves like a house of cards. Then, just like that, he pushed me away and turned to leave. Everything after that is a blur. Darkness swallowed the room. I don't remember collapsing or what happened in the moments that followed. When the light came back, his face was the first thing I saw. Eric. Holding my head gently in his hands, pressing a cold glass of water to my lips. I felt the liquid trickle into my mouth. His arms lifted me effortlessly and carried me to the couch. My eyes fluttered shut. My mind scrambled to put the pieces together. It had to be exhaustion, the weight of everything, the emotional chaos finally dragging me under. I was drowning in it and somehow he was still there trying to hold me up. "You have my word," he said quietly, "just as I only have yours." That struck something in me, sharp and unsettling. He was right. That truth made me dizzy. "You lied," I whispered. "Maybe," he replied. "Maybe not." "You jerk," I said, but my voice was weak. "I didn't mean it." "Not really." "I guess so," he muttered and his face shifted. Sad, tired, older than it used to be. Roger had told me to spin a story, a carefully tailored confession. Just enough truth to seem raw. Just enough lies to stay in control. He told me to make Eric think I was cornered into honesty. So I did what I'd been trained to do. I began my routine. The emotional pleas, the undying declarations of love, the guilt-tripping, the helplessness. All the familiar lines. But Eric didn't budge. "I told you what happened," I cried, reaching for him, grabbing his arms, desperate now. He pulled away. "Come on, Melissa," he said, his voice breaking. "Even last week when I invited him over, you were smiling. You were relaxed. Around him. You didn't flinch. You didn't act scared." His voice rose. "You kept this from me. This. Who do you think I am?" I tried again, reaching out, pleading. "But I love you. That's all that matters." He didn't answer. He just walked away. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. He wasn't supposed to leave. But then, thank God, he turned back. "What about the cufflink?" he asked, his voice low. Relief flooded me. Finally, something I could anchor to. I had heard 1,000 words from him in the past few weeks, but this was something I could work with. But his next words stunned me. "You said he controlled you," Eric said, his tone flat. "That he hurt you. That he assaulted you." "Yes," I cried, voice trembling, eyes filling with tears. "Yes, Justin. He did. He hurt me. He stared at me, face unreadable. Assaulted you? He repeated, the word thick with disbelief. Really? And then what? You screamed for help? You ran to a neighbor's house? You called the police? You called me? I couldn't speak. My voice caught in my throat. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at me, really looked, and in the silence that followed I understood exactly what he meant. And I had no answer. Noah struggled at first. He rebelled, cried, asked for his dad constantly. And for 2 straight weeks, it was like living inside a storm. But eventually he quieted down, gave in to the new normal. My heart hurt watching him go through that. I should have been relieved when the resistance faded, and I was a little. But there was also this unsettling disappointment in me, like I was watching him become someone smaller, more resigned. Like maybe he'd inherited his father's quiet fatalism, that heavy kind of acceptance that makes you take every blow life throws without fighting back. Still, the silence gave me space. Space to sleep, to think, to pretend things weren't unraveling. Robert, of course, made sure to steal whatever peace I found. He drained me every time he showed up, emotionally, physically, mentally. He always seemed to want more. And finding someone to watch Noah while I was with him was becoming harder and harder. Each excuse I made chipped away at the person I used to be. Even then, some part of me still responded to Robert's touch. It was confusing. His words, his promises, they sounded like fiction now. Distant. Too smooth. One night, I let out a yawn while he was talking. That sounds boring, I said flatly. His expression darkened immediately. He sat up, muttering something I couldn't quite catch, then turned toward me. The light cast shadows across his face, sharp and cold. His skin glistened slightly with sweat. He was still undeniably attractive, but the magic had faded. Why do you always have to humiliate me, Melissa? He asked, his voice tense, almost wounded. I looked straight at him. Don't ask me why I do the things I do, Roger. The next moments unraveled faster than I could track. There was shouting, footsteps, a scramble toward the back door. Roger bolted into the narrow path behind the house, the one that led to the woods. I followed, but my legs gave out. I collapsed on the grass, gasping for breath, my hands brushing against 2 still bodies. My lover. And my husband. The police came before Eric regained consciousness. I sat there numb, beside them as the flashing lights and voices filled the night. Men in sterile white suits moved like shadows, photographing everything, collecting fragments of a shattered story. Others went through the house, room by room. They asked me questions. I barely heard them. Someone draped a warm blanket over my shoulders. I nodded sometimes, shook my head at others. The answers didn't matter anymore. I just wanted the night to end. When the last officer left, I stayed behind, curled on the cold tile of the kitchen floor, unable to move. The van carrying the bodies was already turning out of the driveway by the time I stumbled to the porch. I stood there alone as the air around me pulsed with everything that had been lost. Their presence still clung to the house, not in voice or form but in weight, in silence. And in that silence I realized, this was the ending. Not the one I wanted, but maybe the one I deserved. I sank onto the front lawn, numb to everything around me, even the concerned stare of our elderly neighbor peering through her curtains. I barely registered her presence. I pulled out my phone and tried calling my mother. Nothing. Her line was dead, not even a ringtone, just silence. I tried Robert's hotel again. No answer. No front desk, no voicemail, no redirect. I stared down at my hands, trembling slightly in my lap. I couldn't meet his eyes. Couldn't face the look I knew was there. The shame. The anger. The truth. I'm sorry, I whispered, voice cracking. Oh yes, Melissa, of course you're sorry, Robert said with a bitter sneer. He stood and walked toward the stained kitchen sink, where the mirror above it was cracked clean down the center. He stared at his reflection for a long moment before turning back to me. I used you, he said, his voice cold and measured. You were just a way to teach my pathetic son a lesson. That's all you ever were supposed to be. But you couldn't leave it at that, could you? The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of a lawn mower outside, the mundane hum of a world still turning. His eyes locked onto mine. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Because I knew he was right. You're one twisted little thing, he added. Just crazy enough to believe you were in control. That broke me. Tears spilled down my face, streaking through layers of old mascara, painting a portrait of a woman unrecognizable even to herself. I stood, slowly, swaying as if gravity had changed its pull. My hand reached out, fingers stretched like claws almost unconsciously toward Robert. He backed away, alarm flickering across his face, but I kept moving forward. "I'm sorry, Daddy," I said, the words barely more than breath. "I know that means nothing to you. It never did. But I am sorry, for all of it. For what I did to you. To Roger. To Eric. And especially to Noah." Robert stepped into the corner, hands raised in defense, the arrogance draining from his face. For once he looked human. Fragile even. And just for that moment I didn't hate him. But I didn't forgive him either. The air between us held no resolution. Only the weight of things unsaid. The gloating man was gone. All that was left was silence, and a woman finally reckoning with what she'd become.